The proposal, Evelyn Rose Bennett stood perfectly still in the cramped sitting room of her uncle's boarding house, her hands folded so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The autumn rain drummed against the window like impatient fingers, and somewhere in the distance a train whistle pierced the gray afternoon. She was 19 years old, and in this moment she felt both ancient and terribly young. Uncle Marcus sat hunched over his desk, his face drawn and pale in the lamplight. Across from him sat a man Evelyn had never seen before, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore the rough clothing of a working man, his hands calloused and strong as they rested on his knees. "This is Daniel Cole," Uncle Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of shame. "He owns a cattle ranch about 40 miles north of here. He's a widower with 3 children who need tending." Evelyn's throat tightened. She knew what was coming. She had known since Uncle Marcus had summoned her from her room that morning with an expression that mixed desperation and guilt in equal measure. Daniel Cole cleared his throat. "Miss Bennett, I'll be plain with you. I'm not looking for romance or companionship. My children have been without a mother for nearly 2 years now, and they're suffering for it. The eldest, Sarah, tries her best, but she's only 9. They need proper care, proper meals, proper schooling." His voice was deep and measured, like a man who chose his words carefully because he had learned that careless ones cause damage. "I can offer you a home, security, and respect," he continued. "You would have your own room until you decided otherwise. I'm not a cruel man, Miss Bennett, but I'm not a warm one either. My heart is buried with my wife, and I don't expect that to change." The honesty was brutal and somehow appreciated. Evelyn had heard enough pretty lies in her life to value plain truth, even when it stung. Uncle Marcus leaned forward. "Evelyn, my debts have caught up with me. The creditors are coming next week, and they'll take everything, including this roof over our heads. Mr. Cole here has agreed to settle my debts in exchange for this arrangement. You'd be doing me a tremendous service." Translation. He had gambled away everything, and she was the last card he had to play. Evelyn looked at Daniel Cole again, really looked at him. His face was weathered by sun and wind, marked by lines that spoke of hard work and harder grief. But his eyes, though guarded, held no cruelty. She had learned to spot cruelty in men, and she did not see it here. "May I ask about your children?" she said quietly. Something flickered in Daniel's expression, surprise, perhaps. "Sarah is 9, serious and responsible beyond her years. Thomas is 6 and hasn't spoken more than a handful of words since his mother died. Emma is 4 and doesn't truly remember her mother, though she asks for her constantly." The image of 3 motherless children formed in Evelyn's mind, and something in her chest pulled tight. "And what happened to your wife?" she asked, knowing she was pushing boundaries but needing to know. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Fever took her. It was quick." The finality in his tone told her that subject was closed. Uncle Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Evelyn, I need your answer by tomorrow." She thought of the alternative, staying here until the creditors came, being turned out onto the streets with nothing but the dress on her back. She thought of employment opportunities for young women alone in the city, most of them grim. She thought of 3 children who needed someone to care for them. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I have conditions." Both men looked at her in surprise. "I want to meet the children before the wedding." "I want your word, Mr. Cole, that you'll never raise a hand to me in anger. And I want to be allowed to write letters to whomever I choose without interference." Daniel Cole studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair terms. You have my word." The journey 3 days later, Evelyn found herself sitting beside Daniel Cole in a wagon heading north through rolling hills painted in autumn colors. Her few possessions sat in a trunk behind them, a pitiful collection that represented her entire life up to this point. They had been married that morning in a brief civil ceremony, with Uncle Marcus and the Justice of the Peace as witnesses. No flowers, no celebration, just signatures on paper that bound their lives together. Daniel had given her a simple gold band that was slightly too large for her finger. The silence between them stretched long and uncomfortable. Daniel kept his eyes on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins. Evelyn studied the landscape, trying to imagine this vast, open country as her home. "The children don't know yet," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. "I thought it best to tell them together when we arrive." "How do you think they'll react?" "Honestly, I don't know. Sarah will probably be suspicious. Thomas won't say much either way. Emma might be excited at first, though that could change quickly." "You're very honest about your family's challenges," Evelyn observed. "No point in pretending otherwise. You'll see it all soon enough." They stopped once to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of bread and cheese. As Daniel tended to the animals, Evelyn walked a short distance away, looking out over a valley where a river wound like a silver ribbon through golden grass. "It's beautiful," she said when Daniel joined her. "It's hard country," he replied. "Beautiful, yes, but it demands respect. Winters are brutal. Springs bring flooding. Summers can dry everything to dust. You have to be strong to survive here." "I'm stronger than I look," Evelyn said quietly. Daniel glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw something like approval in his eyes. "I believe you might be." The homestead. The Cole Ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward evening. It was larger than Evelyn had expected. A two-story house with a wide porch, a substantial barn, several outbuildings, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. Smoke rose from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows. As they approached, the front door opened and 3 small figures emerged onto the porch. Even from a distance, Evelyn could feel their eyes on her, assessing this stranger who was entering their world. Daniel pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, then came around to help Evelyn descend. His touch was brief and impersonal, but steady. The children stood in a row like soldiers awaiting inspection. The oldest girl, Sarah, had her father's dark hair and serious eyes. She held the hand of a small blonde girl who must be Emma, while a boy with sandy hair stood slightly apart. His gaze fixed on his shoes. "Children," Daniel said, his voice gentle in a way Evelyn hadn't heard before. "This is Miss Evelyn Bennett. As of this morning, she's Mrs. Cole now. She's come to help take care of things here, and I expect you to show her respect and courtesy." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. Emma tugged on her sister's hand and whispered something Evelyn couldn't hear. Thomas didn't look up at all. Evelyn stepped forward, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. She crouched down to be closer to Emma's level. "Hello," she said softly. "I know this must be very surprising for all of you. I promise I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm just here to help if you'll let me." Emma stared at her with wide blue eyes. "Are you going to be our new mama?" The question hung in the air like something fragile. Evelyn felt Daniel tense beside her, but she kept her focus on the little girl. "I'm going to be here to take care of you," Evelyn said carefully. "What you choose to call me is up to you. For now, Evelyn is just fine." Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice cool and controlled. "Father, is Miss Evelyn staying in Mother's room?" The tension became almost visible. Daniel's face hardened slightly. "No," he said firmly. "Miss Evelyn has the guest room for now. Your mother's room remains closed." Something about that statement sent a chill through Evelyn, but she didn't question it. There would be time later to understand the geography and rules of this house. "Why don't we get your trunk inside?" Daniel suggested, already moving toward the wagon. "Sarah, show Miss Evelyn to her room. Emma, Thomas, help bring in the smaller bags." The children moved with practiced efficiency, clearly used to following their father's instructions. Evelyn followed Sarah into the house, her heart beating faster with each step into this new and uncertain life. Settling. In the first weeks at the Cole Ranch were a careful dance of boundaries and adjustments. Evelyn rose before dawn each morning, determined to prove herself useful. She learned the temperamental wood stove that heated the kitchen, discovered where things were kept in the pantry, and slowly began to understand the rhythm of ranch life. Sarah watched her constantly with those sharp, assessing eyes. The girl was unfailingly polite but kept an emotional distance that felt like a wall. She would accept help with her younger siblings, but offered nothing of herself in return. Thomas remained almost entirely silent. He would nod or shake his head when asked direct questions, but volunteered nothing. Evelyn noticed he spent hours sitting by the window, staring out at the pastures with an expression far too old for his young face. Emma was the easiest, her 4-year-old heart still open enough to accept kindness at face value. She began following Evelyn around the house, chattering about everything and nothing, her small hand sometimes slipping into Evelyn's as they walked. Daniel was gone most days, working the ranch from dawn until well after dark. When he was present, he was quiet and distant, though never unkind. He asked Evelyn if she had everything she needed, listened to her concerns about the children, and then retreated into his own silence like a man seeking shelter. But Evelyn began to notice strange things. Late at night, she would hear footsteps in the hallway outside her room. They would pause at a door down the hall, the door Daniel had said led to his late wife's room, and then continue on. Sometimes she heard the creak of hinges, as if that forbidden door was being opened. The children never went near that room. They would walk past it quickly, eyes averted, as if something dangerous lurked behind that closed door. And there were the nightmares. Several times a week she would wake to the sound of a child crying out in distress. She would rise and find Daniel already there, sitting on the edge of Thomas's bed or holding Emma, speaking in low, soothing tones that she couldn't quite make out. One particularly bad night, she found Sarah standing in the hallway in her nightgown, tears streaming down her face. "I heard her," Sarah whispered when she saw Evelyn. "I heard Mama calling for us." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "Sweetheart, you were dreaming." But Sarah shook her head violently. "No, she calls sometimes." From her room. "Father says we must never answer." Before Evelyn could respond, Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, his face pale in the lamplight. "Sarah, back to bed," he said quietly but firmly. The girl obeyed immediately, but not before Evelyn saw the fear in her eyes. When they were alone, Evelyn turned to Daniel. "What is she talking about?" "Night terrors," Daniel said shortly. "The children have them sometimes. Best not to encourage the talk." But something in his expression told Evelyn he was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. The neighbor's warning, Margaret Ashford arrived the following Tuesday with a basket of preserves and a warm smile. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the weathered hands of someone who knew hard work. "I thought you might appreciate some company," she said, as Evelyn invited her in. "Being new to the territory and all." They sat in the kitchen while the children played outside, and Margaret spoke easily about ranch life, the upcoming winter, and the rhythms of the community. But as she prepared to leave, her expression grew serious. "Evelyn, dear, I feel I should speak plainly with you. There's talk about this place." "What kind of talk?" Margaret hesitated, then lowered her voice. "About why Daniel's wife really died, and about the room he keeps locked." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "The fever killed her. Daniel told me?" "That's what was said officially," Margaret agreed carefully, but there were strange circumstances. "Clara was healthy one day and dead 3 days later, and she said things at the end, things that frightened people." "What things?" "That she needed to stay in that room, that she couldn't leave, that if she left, something terrible would happen to the children." Margaret's eyes were troubled. "The doctor thought it was delirium from fever, but Clara's sister swears she was lucid till the very end." "Why are you telling me this?" Margaret reached out and squeezed Evelyn's hand. "Because you're a kind soul, and you deserve to know what you've walked into. Daniel Cole is a good man, but he's carrying something heavy, and whatever it is, it's affecting those children." After Margaret left, Evelyn stood at the kitchen window, watching the children play. Sarah was pushing Emma on a makeshift swing while Thomas sat nearby, still and watchful. That night, Evelyn made a decision. When the house had settled into sleep and she heard those familiar footsteps pause at the forbidden door, she rose from her bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. Daniel stood with his hand on the door handle, his back to her. He was dressed only in his nightshirt, his hair disheveled, and his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Daniel," she said softly. He spun around, startled, and for just a moment she saw raw fear in his eyes. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you. But we both know neither of us has been sleeping well." She took a step closer. "What's in that room?" "It's not your concern." I'm living in this house with your children. Everything here is my concern. Her voice was gentle but firm. Let me help you. Daniel's face contorted with some internal struggle. His hand remained on the door handle, trembling slightly. You'll think I'm mad, he whispered. I won't. He studied her face in the dim lamplight, searching for something. Whatever he found there must have decided him, because his shoulders sagged in defeat. My wife didn't die from fever, he said finally. Or rather, the fever was only part of it. She died trying to protect our children from something I still don't fully understand. He pushed the door open, and warm air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of roses and something else, something medicinal and strange. Evelyn followed him inside. The room was immaculate, as if someone had just stepped out for a moment. A large bed dominated the space, its covers turned down invitingly. But what drew Evelyn's attention were the mirrors, dozens of them, covering every wall, reflecting the lamplight in dizzying patterns. And in those reflections, Evelyn saw something that made her breath catch. For just a second, the briefest instant, she saw the image of a woman standing in the corner, her face pale and sad, her lips moving as if speaking words no one could hear. Do you see her? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. Because I do. Every night. My wife, Clara, standing in this room, unable to leave. Evelyn's rational mind wanted to dismiss it as shadows and grief-induced hallucination. But she had felt something the moment she stepped through that door. A presence that was neither threatening nor entirely benign. Tell me everything, she said. The truth. They sat together in that mirror-lined room, and Daniel told her the truth he had hidden from everyone, including himself, for as long as possible. Clara had been studying local folklore, fascinated by the stories told by the indigenous people who had lived on this land before settlers arrived. She had learned of a protective ritual, something that could bind a mother's spirit to a place to guard her children from harm. When she contracted the fever and realized she was dying, she had performed that ritual in secret, binding herself to this room, to this house, trying to ensure her children would always be protected. But something went wrong, Daniel said, his voice hollow. She became trapped, not fully alive, not truly dead. Just here in this room, unable to move on. The children sense her presence. That's why they have nightmares, why Sarah hears her calling. Clara is trying to reach them, but she's caught behind some kind of barrier. And you've kept this secret for 2 years? What was I supposed to do? Tell people my wife's ghost is haunting our home? They'd think I was insane. They'd take my children away. He looked at Evelyn with desperate eyes. I tried to free her. I brought in a minister, a priest, even a woman from the reservation who knew the old ways. Nothing worked. So I keep this door closed, keep the children away, and pretend that everything is normal. Evelyn stood and walked slowly around the room, studying the mirrors. In their reflections, she caught glimpses again of that pale figure, always at the edge of vision, never quite fully visible. She's not trying to haunt you, Evelyn said suddenly, understanding dawning. She's trying to communicate something. She stayed to protect the children, but she can't do that from behind this barrier. How do you know? Because a mother's love doesn't become twisted or dark. It remains pure even in death. Evelyn turned to face Daniel. We need to help her finish what she started. We need to let her protect her children in the way she intended and then let her rest. How? Evelyn walked to the mirrors and placed her hand against the cool glass. In the reflection, the image of Clara became clearer, and Evelyn saw her mouth forming a single word over and over. Together. Not you alone, Evelyn said to Daniel. Not me alone. Together we need to reach her. Your love as her husband, my role as the one caring for her children now. 2 mothers, one living and one past, united in protecting the same children. Understanding flickered in Daniel's eyes. You believe this. You actually believe it. I believe love is the strongest force in this world or any other, and I believe your wife deserves peace. Over the following days, Evelyn and Daniel worked together in that forbidden room. They spoke to Clara's presence, telling her that her children were loved and protected. Evelyn described their daily lives, their small triumphs and struggles, assuring the trapped spirit that they were safe. Slowly, the temperature in the room began to change. The oppressive weight that had hung over the house for 2 years started to lift. The children's nightmares lessened, and Sarah, for the first time since her mother's death, smiled without shadows behind her eyes. On a cold November evening, with the first snow falling outside, Evelyn and Daniel stood together in that mirror-lined room one final time. The presence that had lingered there felt different now, lighter, at peace. In the largest mirror, Clara's image appeared clearly for the first time, whole and radiant. She looked at Daniel with infinite tenderness, then at Evelyn with profound gratitude. Her lips moved, forming words they couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Thank you. Love them. Love each other." Then she was gone, not violently or with drama, but like a gentle exhalation, a finally released breath. The mirrors suddenly reflected only the 2 living people standing before them, hand in hand. Daniel turned to Evelyn, and she saw his eyes were wet with tears, not of grief, but of relief. "She gave us her blessing," he whispered. Evelyn squeezed his hand. "And now we must honor it. Together." For the first time since she had arrived at the coal ranch, Daniel pulled her into an embrace, not perfunctory or distant, but genuine and warm. And as they stood there in what was no longer a haunted room but simply a quiet memorial to a love that transcended death, Evelyn realized that her arranged marriage had transformed into something she had never expected, a real family, earned through compassion, understanding, and the courage to face darkness with love. The secret that had changed everything wasn't that Daniel's house was haunted. It was that love, in all its forms, had the power to heal even the deepest wounds and bridge the space between life and death, between strangers and family, between duty and devotion.